in the dating today, it's like I don't feel like I'm being treated as a human.
Right. Same.
It's very transactional.
Same.
It's transactional.
Very
Or if like I could have 30 matches on Hinge and I can send like, hey, like how's it going? Follow up. They message me a little bit and then nothing.
Welcome everybody to the Not For Nothing podcast, hosted by the dynamic duo Michael and Ashley Maland, where they delve into life, love, relationships, and personal growth. Be sure to tune in every week for a refreshing take on life's most important lessons. All right, so we're back with Phil Treiber and our new co-host Ashley Maland. Welcome back again, Ash.
Thanks.
We love you here. We love you here now.
Thank you very much.
So what's going on, man? How was the? Well, you live in Boca now. Boca?
I'm actually in Delray. My office is in Boca.
Very nice.
So originally from New York, though?
Yes.
Okay. Where in New York?
Born and raised in Nassau County on Long Island.
Okay. So I actually lived in Smithtown for a little while.
Okay.
I did my undergrad at Hofstra.
Oh, yeah. I know Hofstra well.
Yeah. Big party school.
Aren't they all?
I don't know. Hofstra was a special kind of place, let me tell you.
Yes.
Yeah, it really was.
Yeah, Uniondale, Long Island.
Yeah.
Yep.
It was pretty wild times, but, you know. Fraternities were big, sororities were big. You know.
You have the train, you go to the city, you get, a half hour, you're in a whole nother mess of trouble.
Yeah, the Garden City Hotel had like notoriously great parties.
But you went from that to a therapist, so...
Yeah.
Yes.
So do you typically specialize in men's psychology?
Men's psychology is what I specialize in, yes.
So you do couples also, marriage?
So I have a couple of counselor who works for me, who I have educated in the men's psychology, men's issues realm.
Okay.
So it's very different because they do not teach us the men's psychology work when we're doing our master's degrees.
Okay.
Right. Even within the sociocultural class, like there might be one little section on men, but it's usually within like the Latino men or the Black community. Like they do not do men overall. So that's something that I've really had to dig into myself. And then I've brought that to the couples counselor, Victoria, who works for me. And then have been very public about my message and speaking to other professionals because 9.5 out of 10 therapists have no clue how to actually approach men from a culturally competent standpoint and to be effective working with men.
Wow.
So I've really like had to specialize in this and develop my own research and things along that, line because it's not something that's actually out there.
That makes sense.
Yeah,
I can't tell you how many people, or men specifically, that I know that have said they've been to therapy and it didn't work for them.
It's because there's so many inherent problems with our environment.
Right.
Like the therapeutic environment, the actual therapeutic space, that room is inherently alienating for men. Right. Walking into therapy itself is enemy territory.
Right.
But then you walk in and there's the lotus flowers and there's candles and everything's soft and nice. We get the message, like even from the waiting room, when you walk in and there's like People magazine, or this is somewhat stereotypical, right?
No, it's all right.
But Town and Country and like it's very soft and very cushy. Men are walking into that waiting room, receiving the message that you are not welcome.
Yeah.
Right. Out the gate.
Or something's wrong with you for the fact that you're here.
Right.
Which they know, obviously, if they're going. But, it's demasculating, I would say.
I guess. It's not geared to making men comfortable.
Not at all.
Doing it. But real quick, so before we get into that.
Yes, absolutely.
So what kind of set you on this path, though? Like, what made you want to get into this field and, your history a little
I
bit?
did not actually set out to be a psychotherapist or a clinician at all. The one thing is like when I was in my middle school years and high school years, there was this dynamic where people would come to me to like talk about their stuff, right? Even like girlfriends of mine who said they're sexual assaulted or like any issues with their families. Like we would just like be up late, just like messaging about these things. And I think that was because like I was always a very sensitive little boy, right? I always had that other side of me to where I felt inherently different because I always did have these big feelings. I just didn't know what to do with them because I had men in my life, like I had my father and my uncles and everything, but they didn't really know what to do with me being a sensitive little guy. So I always got these very conflicting messages about what it meant to be a man, what I did with my emotions and feelings, but I also had these very strong, powerful women in my aunts and my mother and my grandmothers who were like really the matriarchs saying that there was nothing wrong with me having these feelings. Right. So then for my college years, like I went to I got a 4-year degree in finance because that's what I thought that the Treiber men did. We were businessmen. But halfway through, like I was always struggled with substance use disorders. I was always partying super hard. And halfway through my bachelor's degree, I added on a minor in psychology. Because I was like, there's something in me that was pulling me towards like, hey, if I learn more about myself and about people, I potentially could fix myself. But then I had like an existential crisis at the end of my 4-year degree. I graduated with the finance degree. I ran to Vail, Colorado for 18 months, a year, 18 months. And I worked on the mountain, got deeper into my substance use. And then I bounced around for the next 8 years or so.
Do you mind if I ask what your
alcohol, cocaine, pills, all the stuff that just made me feel different inherently inside.
Numb.
Right.
Yeah.
Is that why you enjoy the numbing part of it? Is that why you did it, you think?
I like the effect it produces.
Okay.
Right. It also made me into the man that I really wanted to be more social, to not have anxiety and fears, but then also it really enabled me to avoid a lot of the other things that were happening in my life, like not having the path, the journey, but then also I just wasn't comfortable in my own skin.
Yeah.
Within the 12-step fellowships, we talk about being restless, irritable, and discontented until I can again attain that sense of ease and comfort that comes from the first drink or the first use. Right. And I chased that. Right. To where I had significant medical problems because of my drinking. Right. I always say like I'm an alcoholic by trade, but then all the other dry goods and other things came into play as well. Right. But I mean, I had pancreatitis 8 times, 9 times, ERCPs, MRCPs, biliary stents in my pancreatic ducts. They took my gallbladder out to where I was literally laying in a hospital bed at 25. And doctors saying, if you keep drinking the way that you are, you're not going to make 30.
Wow.
But my overall mentality was, okay, I'm doing cocaine and whiskey. Whiskey's a dark liquor. If I switch to vodka, it's probably cleaner. It doesn't have as many impurities.
Really?
Wow.
So then I'll transfer that over to those other substances so I can keep this thing going. And there were multiple times I swore it off. I'm never going to do this again. But then that obsession would kick in and eventually I would go back to it under the guise and the lie that, hey, it'll be different this time.
Yeah.
Right.
I can handle it.
I can control it. Or hey, it was this substance I had the problem with.
Yeah.
I could use this one over here.
Yeah.
Right.
So I bounced around, went to treatment a few times, crashed and burned. And then it wasn't until I finally had enough. I was done, contemplating, suicide or self-harm just because I didn't see any other way out.
Wow.
Yeah, it's that's what it takes though. You need to be like, for me, it was the same. Like it was, I got so worn down and beaten down by it. I couldn't do it anymore. The lie really was the hardest thing.
Yeah.
Like lying to everyone and even my mother, like everyone. And it really beat me down to a point where I just couldn't handle it anymore. Wow. And that's when I made the decision that I needed to get clean.
Yeah. Have you heard of Gabor Mate? He's like one of my favorite people in the world. But obviously, you probably know a lot about him because he specializes in addiction. So I love how he talks about, addicts are actually just people that are trying to cover up their pain. They're just people, but they are deeply, deeply hurting and they can't handle the reality of that pain. So they cover it up and numb it with things that can take them away from it. And it's so sad to me. Like, it's just so heartbreaking because we are so judgmental of addicts and people that struggle with any sort of addiction. We're so judgmental. Like, we just assume they're like this person that just didn't do anything with their life. And, they deserve it because they did this to themselves. And it's like, we have to learn to look past that. We have to learn to look past the addiction and look at who the person is and what happened to them and why they ended up there and do better as a society to help these people, because we're all capable of ending up there. Every single one of us could end up there. One horrible thing could happen in your life and change the trajectory of who you are and send you down that path easily, And it makes me feel so sad for the homeless too, because, obviously a lot of them are addicts that probably had family that had gave up at some point or, whatever, who you never know.
Childhood traumas, or they're repeating the same behaviors that were modeled for them.
Exactly.
It's the same idea as when I worked in substance abuse for years. That's where I cut my teeth. Right. So, I'm a master certified addictions professional. I'm in recovery myself. So I understand that world. Right. And when I worked in the residential level of care, so right out of detox, they came down to me. And one of the first questions I would ask people is okay, what were the positives of your use? They'd be like, what do you mean? I've overdosed this many times. My partner left me. I got a DUI. I got fired. I have legal charges. And I was like, sure. There's the quote unquote negative side of it. Right. But what was the positive payoff to your use? And throughout a line of questioning and asking people questions, I'm like, why were you doing it? What were the benefits of your use?
Yeah.
Numbing, able to feel comfortable. My anxiety wasn't there. I was able to get through the day with my depression. So then I would tell them like, hey, because I'm a huge fan of informed consumers. That's the way I approach my work with men, is that if we're talking about something, I want you to understand why it's important we're talking about it. If we're talking about cognitive behavioral therapy, if we're doing EMDR, if we're doing inner child work, which is one of my favorite things of all time, inner child shadow work, I'm going to teach you the mechanisms of it so you understand why we're doing it.
Yeah.
But the thing is, like, if they told me, hey, it helped me with my anxiety, what that tells me as a clinician, anxiety is going to be one of my main targets.
Yeah.
Because if you learn to manage the anxiety, then we won't need those other unhealthy coping mechanisms so they can feel comfortable with their own skin.
Yeah, exactly.
That's great, man. I mean, so you love what you do.
It's the best.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't feel like I'm going to work,
Yeah.
right? Like the same way that you see me right now is the way that I'll show up in the office. Right, I wear the t-shirt. Sometimes I'll wear a hat, depending. But I'm showing up on a daily basis, running this business, knowing that I'm really doing my best to make a difference to where I don't feel like I'm working.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Now, of course, the days where I'm seeing 8 guys in a row is a lot.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah.
You know, I get tapped out pretty quickly.
Yeah.
But I love it.
Again, I'm not a therapist, but that's kind of like where I'm at. Like, I feel like it helps me heal too, like helping other people with the things that I know I've struggled with. Like, just even if you're just one step ahead of them, you know, which you could very easily go backward, but it's like, even if you're just one step ahead of them, just like being able to reach out your hand and say, I've been there and I've done that. Like, it helps me heal. It makes me feel better as a person that I'm taking the things that hurt me and helping someone else come out of their hurt, you know? So
there's times where I'm in session and I'm talking to a guy about a specific thing, and I'm like, am I talking to myself?
You're right. Well, you kind of are.
I was like, I'm telling them like, hey man, like the discipline with your coping mechanisms and hey, expanding with like different philosophies and things like that. I'm like, I haven't read my Stoic stuff in like 2 weeks. Like maybe, okay, Phil, you gotta circle back around to it. Yeah,
you are. It's like you're reminding yourself as you help them. Every single time.
It's nice though to like even for you, like even though you're not there, it's nice to help people though. You know, and the one thing I've noticed doing this is that people love to know that they're not alone.
It's the altruism aspect, but it's that connection.
It is.
It really is.
For sure. And I think a big problem with some of the people, I mean, for me, what it was I had really poor coping mechanisms, which I still kind of do today. But we were talking about it, you kind of default to them. Like if you don't learn new ones.
That's so true.
So it's tough sometimes.
And the new ones are hard because it's like so outside of your, routine. Like, it's easier to fall into your typical mechanisms because they're comfortable.
Yeah,
it's also, I mean, it's not only comfortable from like a mental side of it, but if we talk about neurologically speaking, those patterns of our unhealthy coping mechanisms have worked.
Yes,
right. So
exactly.
those neurological patterns in our brain are very well established.
Yeah, there's a reward.
We can fall into it very, very quickly.
Yeah.
But you're right. When we learn something new, it's very difficult for our brain to adapt to those things because it requires so much more energy for our brain to develop new neurological pathways that it resists that.
It's so fascinating to me.
It is.
The idea is that like when we have an established pattern, the way that I just speak to my guys about that is your unhealthy mechanisms are like a 6-lane highway in LA.
Right.
It is well traveled. It is well established. It is there. But when we start walking in a little path through the woods of a new pattern, over time, that little path through the woods becomes a sidewalk, becomes a 1-lane country road. And as we're developing those new neurological pathways, one thing that happens is called synaptic pruning, is that as we're establishing those new pathways, we prune down that 6-lane highway to a 4-lane highway, to a 3-lane highway, to a 2-lane highway, to eventually it'll always kind of be there. But then our new patterns become that 6 to 8-lane highway in LA. That's the way it is for me with my recovery.
Yeah, that's what you lean on at that point.
Right. I don't think about drinking or using. Right.
That's incredible.
I identify as a recovered alcoholic. Right. I'm not cured. I will go back to it at some point, but I'm recovered. The obsession to drink and use has been lifted to me.
Yeah.
I can go to bars, concerts. I've dated women who use substances. It doesn't bother me anymore.
Right.
Right.
I like how Gabor Mate says that with like his patients, he says, you're not an alcoholic. You're not an addict. You're a person using alcohol and drugs to cope with things that you haven't healed from. I like how he says that because he doesn't want people to identify as the thing that they were. Like
sure. I mean, I get both sides of it, but because I'm so rooted in the 12-step programs.
I know. Yes, exactly.
I'm always going to be an alcoholic.
No, I understand that.
Right. But it's also the other side. Like because I don't really diagnose out of the DSM, but when I speak to guys about what anxiety, like an anxiety disorder is, what a PTSD, what a bipolar, what a depression diagnosis is, I'm very, very clear about this is not your identity.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. And that's the way we can change that wording is that you don't say that I am depressed, I'm experiencing depression.
Yeah, that's good.
To put that distance in between those things.
Yeah.
Right. Because again, a lot of people can wield their diagnoses against other people and family. Like, I can't do that. I have anxiety.
Yeah.
You don't understand. I can't do that because I have depression.
Yeah.
When then I call, I'm like, yeah, you can't do that anymore.
I have a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
How do you get more men to be open to the idea of therapy? How do you get them in the door? Because so many of them are so resistant to it, just for for the reasons you talked about earlier, just it doesn't feel right. Like it doesn't feel like they're in where they should be when they walk in the doors. But like, how do you get men, even just men that like maybe they're not struggling with addiction, maybe it's just a little bit of anxiety, but like they're not going to talk to anybody about it because they're so closed off to that. Men feel like they have to be stoic all the time. They can't show any of their cards. Like, so how do you get like a super masculine man that's struggling mentally but keeping it in to be open to therapy?
That's a very tough question to answer because there's so many different factors that come into play. Where do you want me to start?
I mean, okay, like how do we get the message like to where society is more accepting of it as a whole? Like how do we create that message where there's not such a stigma around it, where men aren't like embarrassed by the idea of it?
That is a very difficult one because one of the big things that I've been doing recently is going back and reading a lot more research about this that's come out mostly from Europe and in England.
Are there more studies in those areas than there are here?
They're looking at it from a different way because if you go back and look at the history of gender studies, the research is absolute bullshit. Because one of the ways, like, listen, I identify as a feminist to a point. The true feminists supported men.
Yeah.
It was not this extremist idea that men are evil, men are bad, et cetera, et cetera. This whole idea of quote unquote toxic masculinity.
Right.
I don't use that term. We can use the term problematic masculinity, but also because what we've done in our society is that we have made masculinity itself, which is a very healthy, positive thing, the enemy.
Yeah.
That is not good. And it's been so stigmatized to where men are getting into what we call the double bind. Our masculinity is a good thing.
I agree.
It is a very healthy thing. But the problem is that we have been receiving messages telling us that is not a good thing. So the more education, the more information we put out there about men getting into therapy is actually counterbalancing and actually working against men.
Right.
Which is why we need to make that approach to get men into therapy in a much different way. So like reducing the stigma by talking about the stigma might be doing some things, but if we actually look at the research, it's not adding up, which is like new over the past couple of years. And the double bind is that on one aspect of our society, men are being told that we need to do a specific thing. Right? We need to be strong men, right? We have to take risks. We have to work these very dangerous jobs, do those things and ignore all of the statistics of our death rates, our suicide rates, et cetera. Oh, but by the way, also you have to be vulnerable and open up and speak about your emotions and be open. We're screwed on both ends. For men, emotions and feelings are a liability for us because if you look at our role within our societies over thousands of years, if I am like in the forest and we are hunting for boar, we are hunting for deer, and I allow my emotions to come up, it is a liability.
Right.
True.
Right. As our full humans, we have to be able to have both sides of the equation.
Right.
It's what Terry Real calls the great cleaving.
Right.
To where we as people are these full humans, but then we are taught to cleave off anything that can be perceived as feminine.
Wow.
Perceived as feminine,
right? Which
is feelings and emotions, which is vulnerability, which is openness. But what that does, that leaves us as half people.
Yeah.
We need to be able to pull that in.
So let me ask you a question. Like, genuinely, though, do you really think that there's ever going to be a world where men will accept that and
but
start to open up more?
For thousands of years in different ways.
Well, you're saying what? Opened up and expressed ourselves?
There has to be a differentiation within our roles. So one of the things Terry Real did was when he went to Africa, he asked like a very tribal organization. He went to the tribal elders who were men, and he asked them, what makes a real man? They didn't know what that question meant. They said, what do you mean, like a warrior? And he was like, sure. So the thing that these guys, again, like these tribes have been around for hundreds and not thousands of years, said that we need to be able to know when to be a warrior and when not to be a warrior.
Wow.
So when we're out hunting, we are out warring, specific role. But when we come back to the tribe with our women and our children, we need to know when to flip on the warrior mentality and flip off the warrior mentality.
Oh, wow.
Right.
That is like mind blowing, even though it seems like such a simple thing, but
you would think, right?
I just feel like men don't know how to do that.
No, we don't.
Even now.
And this all started, and it was a major change in our mentality really around the Civil War. The Civil War, this shifted significantly because prior to the Civil War, men had very close, intimate relationships with other men. That's one of the reasons why people think, and they have like this theory that Abraham Lincoln was gay or bisexual, because he had this very close, younger male friend who he wrote very, very intimate letters to. And they even slept in the same bed together at times. But prior to then, men had these very intimate, like, nicknames for each other, like lover boy and things like that.
Really?
But then once the society started to shift and change, homosexuality became a crime. It became a mental disorder. So that whole thing of actually showing and expressing intimacy towards another man could be potentially perceived as homophobic behavior, which then could be perceived as a mental disorder, which then you could be tarred and feathered or put into jail and labeled within your community.
Wow.
So one of the things that Liz Plank, who is a feminist writer in her book For the Love of Men, spoke about is that you can actually call this quote unquote toxic masculinity like post-traumatic homophobia.
Wow.
Because it is like, it's been a major shift over our societies in the past like 200 years away from this overall intimacy towards other men.
Overcompensating to avoid it, right?
Right. Which is what we're trying to battle against nowadays.
Wow. What do you think it's going to take though? Like truly take to overcome
time.
It? Another 200 years?
Time. I'm a firm believer that even within my generation and potentially even the generation afterwards, we're not going to see a significant shift in our society.
Right.
Now, there are guys that like college age guys at like 23, 24 that are not in this place. But then there's like 16, 17-year-old guys that have these intimate friendships with their friends. They talk about their feelings and emotions. So even a 5 or 6 year difference, there's a drastic difference of what's going on here.
Well, I think too, like, culturally, because like I have a friend who she dated a guy from I think Spain or was it Brazil? I'm sorry, from Brazil. He told her he's been living in America for a while, but he said it's so hard to make male friendships here because of where I'm from. You know, we hug each other, we kiss each other on the cheek. You know, and we're not afraid to do that. We don't think anything of it. It's not considered gay where we come from. It's just the way that men react with one another. But when I do those things here, I get a lot of negative responses. People, like other men, think I'm coming on to them when I'm 100% straight. And he said, so it's been really difficult to build friendships here. And I was like, that's so sad because that's how they grow up.
It really is.
Yeah, that's how I grew up.
Really?
Yeah.
You're from Brazil.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So like you have to like completely change your entire perspective just to fit in this society here, the Western culture, because there's men are so afraid to be perceived as feminine in any way that like.
Well, that's what we were taught from the beginning, right?
Yeah.
That's what we call the great cleaving, right? The worst thing that we could potentially be labeled as young boys is gay or feminine, or using a lot of words that I'm not going to use right now that we can be labeled as.
Right.
And then we are then ostracized from the group.
Yeah.
And we can't let that happen.
Yeah.
Because if we're ostracized from the group, we do not survive.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
that's a deep, deep biological and evolutionary holdout to where we need to be part of the group.
Wow.
Right, but you don't understand. So in today's day, right? Like I think it's far more acceptable for guys to open up today than it's ever been.
100%.
Absolutely. So it's like I feel like you just need to get that message out more. Like I think the more people like we do shows like this, right? Like the more you see guys open up, and the more you let people feel like it's okay. I think that's what you need to do. I think people need to see that more.
Yeah.
Well, they need to hear the dialogue, right? They need to hear other men open up publicly,
and masculine men, like
right.
what you would consider a masculine man, at least,
absolutely, yeah, 100%.
That you admire, that you look up to, that you don't perceive as feminine in any way, but like they're willing and open to have discussions like this and even like lean into that part of themselves, you know?
For sure.
Because it's the answer to like the over feminization of men in the 60s and 70s.
Yeah.
Right? Like the pendulum swung way too far.
Yeah.
And then you had guys like Robert Bly in the 80s and 90s pulling men back over to that more masculine side. So the idea now is like we don't really have a really great model for what that looks like. So we're really trying to still figure out what that is.
Yeah.
Right.
But to go back to your original question about how to get more guys into therapy, right? On my website, there's a free PDF I have. It is not mine. I just reframed it. Brothers, sons, daughters, girlfriends, fiancés, wives, mothers, etc., can talk to their men about potentially coming into therapy. But the overall different message that we really need to take is that we need to pull on the actual masculine strings about entering into therapy. So if you go to my website, it's very clear the wording that I have initially is asking for help is not a weakness, it's a strength.
Yeah.
But also the whole idea is that taking control of your problems, of your emotions, is really pulling on that very masculine side.
Yeah.
To where we are not at the whims of these things, but using these components of what masculinity really looks like, which is that stoicism, right? Not stoic, not the definition of stoic, but the actual stoicism philosophy of showing emotion, but having control over them is a very masculine trait because we are hardwired for problem solving. We are hardwired for solutions. So when I get guys into the room, it's really about, hey man, I tell guys, my job is to work myself out of a job. Right, I will arm you with the tools and the facts about yourself through deep insight and a lot of the other woo-woo-y stuff like inner child. So then you don't fucking need me anymore.
Right, exactly.
Right. I was like, listen, man, there's enough business. I don't need you on my couch for 2 years. Right. Well, let's do some deep work. Let's get in there. Let's find some solutions to this thing. I said this to guys to kind of break the tension a little bit. Then you can spread your beautiful little butterfly wings and fly away from me. And then if you need some tweaking, you can come back.
Yeah.
But it's really pulling on that idea of like, hey, man, taking control, taking responsibility, owning these things and not letting these things own you anymore pulls on that very masculine idea of the old school mentality of put on your boots, go to work, but we still have to figure out all this other shit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like even like just getting men to that point where they would be receptive to that would help with relationships so much too, because I like dating culture is like so awful right now with like men just using women like it's another addiction, right? But there's no vulnerability, there's no commitment, loyalty, there's none of that, like because they just don't show emotion anymore and they won't. And it's like I feel like so many men, even if they're a woman, like a perfect woman was in front of them, they would still screw it up if they had to risk being vulnerable in any way, right? And I wish that, especially like I feel from like 26, like the age like 26 up is where it's like horrendously bad. Like they're I get it. Like we talked about this yesterday, but like guys in their 20s, like they're kind of hardwired to just get, sow every seed they possibly can. Right. But I also think that there's like a level to where they're just absolutely terrified of vulnerability with a woman.
Yes, because I turned 37 next week. I'm single. I deleted my apps again last week, right? I'm almost going through like a feminine cleanse type thing, etc.
I'm going through a masculine cleanse.
It's brutal. It's brutal because in the dating today, it's like I don't feel like I'm being treated as a human.
Right. Same.
It's very transactional.
Same.
It's transactional. Or if like I could have 30 matches on Hinge and I can send like, hey, like how's it going? Follow up. They message me a little bit and then nothing.
Well, same. It's the same for women.
Yes.
And I think women are even scared to be vulnerable anymore because they are so used to getting used. And it's like, if I open up my heart to this guy, he's just going to take what he can get from me physically. And then I don't want to end up devastated. Like I have to guard myself.
Yes. But that also comes down to identifying the ideal partner characteristics that you would want in a man.
Yeah, exactly. Not settling for less.
Right. And the whole idea is that as you're dating, and I do this myself, I train my guys to do this. As you're dating, it's not about convincing the other person of why you'd be a good partner for them. No. You are sussing them out on your ideal partner characteristics list as you're dating. Yeah. To where like, listen, if I'm going to be physically vulnerable with this guy and I'm not identifying these very clear ideas if he's not going to be able to meet my emotional needs, you don't do it.
That would have saved me so many heartbreaks.
And it's brutal.
Yeah.
Right? Because the major component of it is, I just had it. Where was it? Right. With sex. Right. biologically speaking, sex is very, very vulnerable for women.
Yes, it is.
Right? It's very vulnerable from a physical standpoint, but it's also extremely risky.
Yeah.
Because you could sleep with a man one time and get pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
And then a lot of changes, a lot of things that are going to happen for over that 9 months or so, to where for men, we are not wired that way. Because if you look at the evolutionary standpoint, we are made to sow seeds, like you said. Yeah. Right? So we just get it out there, et cetera, just make sure that our genetic material is getting out there so that our genetic material and our genetic code continues to go, right? When it comes down to the actual dating capacities of these angles, is that with men, I don't know if it's that they're incapable of being vulnerable, but I think a major component in today's day and age is this hustle culture.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's like they don't have time for your emotions, like as a woman.
Yes.
They just don't have time for it because that requires effort. It requires vulnerability. Right. That requires like time that outside of this hustle that they're working on, you know?
The crazy thing, I think, I'm telling you, I say it all the time. Like, I think it's just social media played a huge role in it. I think it's that, right? Everybody, first off, everybody sees these influencers and they see how successful they are. Everybody's trying to chase that. A lot of people try to chase that, and that's fine. But at the end of the day, there's so many platforms now that give out such toxic messages. On both ends.
I cannot stand it.
So I feel like that's why for women, you know, they get the male side of it, right? From like the Fresh and Fits of the world, the Andrew Tates, and then you know the men get it too from these women that go onto these platforms and make men feel like they're soft if they open up,
or make men feel like they have the right to continue behaving that way because they're willing to put up with it.
Right, absolutely. So it's just these toxic messages coming from both ends, and it's like I just feel like it's put us in a horrible state as far as relationships go. It's wild.
It's like extremes on both ends are the only thing that are being displayed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
you know,
it's crazy, and that's why I think more people need to speak up against those messages. Like there's just not enough people. They're either the people sending out those messages, and then there's the people that just don't address them at all,
or the polar opposite.
Right.
And nobody really wants to go on the polar side of anything. Yeah, I mean, if you're a normal human being, like you just want, like you fall down the middle of everything.
Yeah, it's brutal. It's not reasonable to be that extreme on one side or the other. And when you deal with reasonable people, they don't want to be extreme on one side or the other. They want a rational conversation. They don't need somebody the complete opposite of what, you know, they're talking. I mean, it's wild. You can't have a real conversation with anybody if it's just so like left, right, like the extreme left, extreme right.
Polarization of it.
The polarization is crazy. It's like, how do you get anything resolved?
I have to limit my comments on my Instagram, things like that, because I will talk about masculinity and vulnerability and all these things, and then guys will just come out the gate like, oh, here's another beta man, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes, as if that's the worst thing in the world.
But and they use it as like a demeaning term. It's like, God forbid you treat a woman with respect like you're a beta or a simp. Like,
I had an ex-girlfriend, right? I ended the relationship about 1.5 years ago, and I saw some red flags, ignored them. Right, because I was working on my own things and saying, like, am I being superficial? Am I not being vulnerable? Like, am I giving this an actual shot? Like, my own commitment, anxious attachment type things. Because just because I'm a psychotherapist does not mean that I'm fixed. Right. I ended the relationship with her. You know, it came out as anger, right? Because I really firmly believe that, hey, given her our relationship and her previous relationships, and I hope she's not listening to this because then she'll attack and stalk me on social media like she did previously.
Oh, wow.
To where she would get upset, start to yell and get angry. I would not take the bait, and I would try to communicate in a healthy way, and she would get angrier, right? But then when I would set boundaries and say, hey, this is not working. I don't think that we should see each other anymore. You know, a week or two later, like, hey, can we talk? I was like, I don't really think that's a good idea. Anger and attacks. Right. So to the point where I'm like, on my social media, first off, it was her social media profile that said these things. Then she created another one of like, going on to my posts on my business page, which is at Dude Breathe Counseling, dudebreathecounseling.com. I was called a narcissist. I'm a beta bitch, et cetera, et cetera. Like, I mistreat women, like all of these things that like went along with this because I did not adhere to what she wanted me to do. Yeah. Right. And because I set boundaries, I'm a narcissist. Because I didn't do X, Y, or Z as a beta, right? And these things they're wielded as weapons when most people have no idea what they actually mean.
That's the thing. Even like the men that are talking about being alpha males that don't even know what that actually means.
They have no idea what it is.
It's these pop psychology words that get thrown around. So and
it's comical to hear them say it because it's like, dude, I mean, first and foremost, you can't be an alpha without having respect.
Yeah.
I mean, especially respect for a woman. Like, I mean, I say it all the time. Like, I don't know where these guys, like, when we took a turn where you could publicly humiliate any female, I don't care what she does, and then you want to turn around and call someone a beta for defending them.
They have confused
it's
alpha
insane.
with hyper masculinity.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Right? Nope, they're completely different topics or ideas.
Right. And it's like,
100%.
doesn't an
That's
alpha
why.
male have control over their anger too?
Yeah.
Like, you know.
But they're also going to be in that protector role.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. There was research done by this guy Kimmel, and he took a large group of men, I think it was like 200, 250, and he first asked them what a real man was. The responses they came back with was assertive, authoritative, protector, like all these different aspects. But really what it came down to is get rich, get laid. Right?
Is that what the main answers were?
Real
That's
man.
what I would have expected.
Real man.
That's
right?
what I would have expected.
He
Yeah.
asked the same group of men what a good man was. Honor, integrity, standing up to the little guy, being kind, right? Being emotionally vulnerable, etc. Both same group of men.
Right.
Two different answers about what a real man is versus what a good man is, right? And this is empirical research.
Wow.
I firmly believe that a lot of the guys that I see in my practices are stuck in the real man mentality because it's safe.
Yeah.
And if you go against that, you will be labeled X, Y, or Z, and you'll be ostracized out. Most of my men, they want to be good men.
Right.
They just don't know how.
Yeah.
And that comes down to the boy code, the socialization, the way that we are actually kept inside this boy box, that if we violate that, we're a beta.
Right.
So it's much easier for us to stay in that real man mentality and then maybe let out that good man in different ways.
But you know what's weird to me is I feel like, honestly, I'm not saying that to me, it's far more normal to be a good man, right, than a real man. I mean, I see the Andrew Tates of the world. I don't see don't get me wrong. I see them more now because of social media. But what I'm saying is I think there's far more good men out there than there are people that act like the Andrew Tates of the world. You know what I mean? So I don't understand why guys have such a hard time crossing over to that side of things, because it's not like it's not socially acceptable.
It's appealing. Right. It's appealing at a deep biological level, right? Because if we look at it from, again, like an evolutionary standpoint, right? The man who is the top dog, the man who is seen as has the most resources, has the most women, right? Right. From a biological standpoint, women are going to be attracted to that guy because that means that his status, he has something that I, like at a deep biological level, I want that genetics because that will give my children the best possibility of surviving and thriving in the future. Right. Right. But the problem is that is so appealing to so many young men because it's what this message that they want. But it's empty.
It is.
I can't tell you how many, and this is my own personal experience too, of like throughout certain aspects of my life, certain years of my life, of going on Tinder, doing X, Y, or Z, sleeping around, right? Having these empty experiences to where guys will come in at 40 years old as millionaires, as these successful entrepreneurs in my room, miserable.
Yeah, and miserable.
It's empty. It's not the actual thing that's hitting what they need.
And I like to bring up the point too, like when men live that way, they're not even considering all the people they're hurting along the way.
Oh, absolutely.
Because they're so numb to like emotions and like how other people are affected by their actions that everyone else is getting hurt but them. And then until they hit that point in life, like you said, that
the pain gets great enough.
Where they're like, oh crap, I can't even numb myself anymore. This isn't even numbing for me anymore because it collects. You know, I always say that like pain comes in layers and the higher that it gets, the more it comes out on the surface, you know, like it's sad. It's sad for everyone, really.
It really is.
It is. And you want more for yourself eventually. I mean, that's the problem, right? I mean, it seems great when you're younger. Yep. Right. But then you get older, right? Like you hit 40 years old and you realize you're still alone and, you know, women can't even stand to be around you because you're just you're a douche.
Well, you're shallow.
And you're shallow, right? Like it's wild. So you get stuck in a place where it's just, you know, you're alone and you wind up having regret inevitably because who wants to live like that?
Right.
And these guys are labeled as narcissists.
Yeah.
Right. I have a theory, right? When I did this large presentation for some other professionals on narcissism and gaslighting, specifically from a men's issues lens. I am a firm believer that most people and most men out there, I'll say that, right? Because women can be narcissists too.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
Statistics, number-wise and demographically skews significantly male. But I have this theory that most men who are labeled as narcissists are not actual full narcissists from the narcissistic personality disorder of the DSM criteria. I actually think it's like a very unhealthy and a whole nother degree of significant men's psychology and men's issues. Because if you look at the actual socialization that we go through as men, right, and placed into this boy code, this boy box, and the behavior that shows up that way when it comes to getting money with women, with status, with cars, etc., it really looks like narcissism.
Yeah.
But it's not.
Right.
Right. So I actually have a lot of reels on my Instagram, and I'm actually going through a series right now of like 5 or 6 of them speaking about what narcissism is, what gaslighting is. There's intentional gaslighting. There's unintentional gaslighting.
Absolutely.
I was going to say, like, how do you know the difference between, like, so for example, you're dating a male that has all of these tendencies that a narcissistic man would. You know, they're probably, you know, they're using what they can get from you.
Yep.
Not to say that maybe they don't like you in some way, but like they're not super empathetic to any emotions. They're not open to communication, really. They manipulate you into believing their perspective from things. They gaslight you when you question things. Like, how do you know that this person isn't a narcissist when everything they're displaying is narcissistic?
Right.
Like, obviously you know by the diagnosis, but again, most men don't go to therapy.
Well, the other part of it is, even if you could make the distinction, what difference does it make?
It does, because it really comes down to the way that we're approaching these things. I don't feel good saying this, even when I speak to professionals about it, but this is an actual full piece of the narcissism and then the people that quote unquote narcissists will prey on.
Okay.
It's not that the individual, like if someone goes through a terrible relationship with a man, right, and they are the individual, the female or the male, seems that they were gaslit, intentionally manipulated, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
Someone who is a true narcissist is going to gravitate towards people that they see as weak or victims.
Absolutely.
Right.
True narcissists do not want a challenge.
Right.
They are going to gravitate towards people that they can manipulate.
Yeah,
that they can pull into their thing through the actual stages of gaslighting, right?
So would it be safe to say, for example, that might be one way to distinguish it? Like, for example, like say you're dating this person, they're showing these narcissistic tendencies, but again, you don't want to label someone, right? Like you're seeing the red flags, you're seeing the things, but again, I'm not going to just call somebody a narcissist because they have these qualities, because I think everyone possesses some, right? But if you begin to challenge them, if you begin to hold boundaries, if you begin to ask questions and demand communication, and that person just flees, is that a good indication that they probably are a narcissist? Because
not so much they might be narcissists, but they're not emotionally available and they're not going to be able to meet your needs in the relationship.
How do you know the difference? Because emotional unavailability is, I mean, they go hand in hand, right?
But this comes down to also knowing yourself, right? I mean, I literally have it tattooed on me in Greek, right? This is know thyself, which is above the temple at Delphi. If as a woman or a man, if you guys are going into a relationship and you are starting to ask for these needs to be met, if you are starting to identify, hey, they may not be able to communicate with me the way that I want, right? Oh, but he has a great job, or he loves his mom.
Right,
and you start rationalizing, you're screwed.
Yeah.
Right. The whole idea of when we talk about like narcissistic abuse, we talk about gaslighting, recovery, we talk about these things. The most important thing that the woman or the man can do in those situations is to strengthen their sense of self.
Right.
Capital S self.
Yeah.
If you don't know yourself, and you're going to start violating some of these needs that you have in a relationship, or what you expect from a partner, what you demand from a partner. If you continue to keep seeing this person when they've already shown you evidence of why they're not going to be able to provide this to you, that's on you.
No, I agree.
Yeah.
I 100% agree.
Right.
We've said this. That's
doesn't make it less painful, but I do.
No. I'm not saying
you have to. You have to set. Listen, it's pretty simple to me sometimes. But you have to set boundaries for yourself, and you have to have a standard, just stick with it. Like, if you always stick to it, like he just said, like we spoke about this before, chances are you're going to wind up with somebody that you want to be with. It's when you start lowering the bar for people.
Compromising before they're worthy of it.
Right.
Like,
and it depends on what we're compromising on.
Right.
You can't rationalize certain behavior.
Right.
You know
if you're compromising, I want a relationship and they're saying, I just want a situationship, it's over.
Right.
And I learned that the hard way. It's over,
right.
But the second a man says to me, I just want more of like a situationship, I know what he's really saying is, I want the benefits of this relationship with you, but I don't want you to hold me accountable for anything. And then that way, when you do hold me accountable for anything, I can say, well, we're not together. and it's unfortunate, but I did learn that. And my standards are, immensely higher than they were even just 6 months ago.
Right? We have these experiences to where we then change our behavior as we go forward. Yeah. Right. But that was a great point, right? Like I'm speaking very black and white about this. I don't want that to come across as that I'm not empathetic to the men and women who are abused or who go through these situations over and over and over again. Yeah. My heart breaks for them.
Right.
Yeah.
Because it does, if someone is a true narcissist that pulls them into that web, the whole idea of that gaslighting is that, oh my God, it's my fault that we're here. Yeah. If only I change X, Y, or Z about myself, we'll be able to get back that rock star mentality, that initial honeymoon phase of love.
Right.
And it's a brutal thing to see.
Yeah.
Right. I was working with a young lady when I was working in treatment who I started to perceive her partner was a narcissist, full blown. And one of the things he said to her was, yes, we can get back together, but you have to do X, Y, or Z in the bedroom the way that I wanted you to. And she was seriously considering it because she was so tied up within this mentality of it was my fault. If I change myself, I can make this person narcissist happy again. We will be happily ever after, which is never the case.
No,
and to work with individuals who get caught up in that is absolutely heartbreaking because they're literally, with the whole point of gaslighting, the intentional gaslighting is have the individual to question their sense of reality.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not the standard you get into an argument with your boyfriend or girlfriend. Oh, I didn't mean it that way or anything else like that. Right. That's unintentional gaslighting.
Right.
Like, oh, you're crazy and you don't know what you're talking about.
Right. Technically is gaslighting, but I mean, are we going to just pathologize everything? It's not right when it comes to respect within the relationship.
Right.
No. But if we look at the way a narcissist is doing it, that is very intentional, methodical. They don't even know they're really doing it, but is it a methodical breaking down to identify where the cracks are and how set the hooks they can get into the other person?
Ooh. Well, we were saying they're very deliberate, and some of them are very good. What they do. It's almost like they sit and I don't want to say they practice it, but they become very good at manipulating.
And they're doing it with everybody.
Right. And
not
what
just
they
their intimate
do
partner.
is then they know when they come across certain situations in the relationship, they do certain things to bring them back in, right? Like they give them a sign of hope.
Yep.
Like if, that you can get back
it's called breadcrumbing.
Yeah, right.
Yep.
Like we can
give you a little bit of see?
Right. And then you latch onto it.
I will give you something.
Yeah, you latch onto it because you're like, all right, there's a little bit of hope. Maybe we can get back to it.
Yeah.
And then no matter how many times they disappoint you.
And every time it's worse.
And they do, and they keep doing it. And it's
brutal.
And they say that a narcissist will, continue to do it for as long as you allow it. Oh, yeah. Because the cycle doesn't end until the victim ends it.
Absolutely.
That's what I've heard.
But if you look at a lot of the gaslighting and recovery workbooks, you look at the really good texts that talk about this gaslighting or narcissistic recovery or abuse recovery.
Right.
One of the first chapters after they describe what a narcissist is, the 7 deadly sins of narcissism, and how the tools that they're using, it comes down to you have to do the work on yourself to develop that sense of self-esteem, self-confidence, self-efficacy to no longer put up with that any longer.
Yes, exactly.
Right. That's what it comes down to.
No, I 100% agree. Yeah. And that's the message I try to give out to the women on my page, because my mistake, it wasn't that I was attracting the wrong people.
Sure.
The problem was that I didn't have enough self-confidence or respect to see the red flag and go, that's not what I want, and walk away right then and there instead of trying to look for the good in a person that wasn't showing me that they deserved, my empathy or my, my, whatever. But
love, commitment.
Yeah, they weren't showing me that they deserved that. But I was giving them that benefit of the doubt instead of listening to my instincts. I do believe that when you get to a better place or learn the lesson the hard way enough times, that you finally go, you know what, enough is enough. And this is exactly what I want. And I will not compromise anymore.
Yes.
Until a person comes into my life, no one's perfect, obviously.
I was just going to make that point.
People are going to make mistakes, obviously. But until a person comes into my life and is so consistent and can actually apologize like a normal human being and display more good characteristics than red flags, I'm not interested.
And it's brutal because we want love. We want these
exactly.
things.
We're wired that way.
Listen, I'm turning 37. I was talking to my therapist last week about this, and she says, Phil, your male biological drive is here.
Yeah.
I want to nest. I want children.
Yeah.
I want a partner who I can completely be head over heels and meet her every single need, but then do life with.
Yeah.
Right. I want that so desperately. But then when I go out there and try to identify these characteristics in a partner that I would want online or even in person is brutal.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it gets to the point where I start saying to myself, is like, is she out there?
Right.
Is
no,
that person
exactly.
there? Okay, I have my non-negotiables. Like, okay, really, is that a non-negotiable?
Yeah,
like,
exactly. It's hard to navigate.
Start to make compromises.
It's hard to navigate what's like absolutely necessary and what isn't.
Because then on the other side of it is that I do have that biological drive of needing that physical touch and wanting to have sex and wanting to provide pleasure to a partner, experience it myself. And it's like balancing that out of like going the spiritual route with, no, I'm going to do what I need to do to stay with somebody and find the right person. But then there's also that other like animalistic side that comes up in me. It's like, man, you gotta, blah, 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 blah. Right. So it's like finding that balance and like not playing into those things to when I like to say like when the poison comes up to where it's like, well, maybe she's been messaging me on Instagram a little bit. Maybe I can, if I'm honest and I have integrity and say I'm not looking for anything serious and make sure I'm
because that always works.
Right. And then like maybe then like, oh well, if I start to see if she does have feelings with me, but if we talk about, we have to communicate about these things. Like we could do the situationship, but I just know in my heart, no.
Yeah, never
because
ends well.
someone's going to catch feelings. Someone's going to do X, Y, or Z, and it's never going to work.
People
that way.
are like, it's like almost like you can't accept. I mean, you can say that all you want to people.
It's bullshit.
It's bullshit. There's no way. There's just no way. And some people, you need to realize that some people, if they're into you enough, are going to accept it simply to be around you.
Well, this is what I like. I think men need to understand because I've had arguments with like really good guy friends of mine that they're like, well, I told her I didn't want anything. I told her I didn't want a relationship. And I'm like, it's still your fault. Right. And they're like, how? She's the one that's accepting it. And I said, but is she in love with you right now? Yeah. Right. Well, what did you expect? But my point is like, women are emotional creatures.
They are.
And not only are they emotional creatures, but even like biologically speaking, when a woman sleeps with a man, there are chemicals released that bond her to that man. It is she cannot, unless a woman is truly narcissistic and does not have empathy or emotions like a typical woman does, they are going to get attached to a man that they are sleeping with and spending time with. Sure. And it doesn't matter. And I have to like emphasize this, men, it does not matter what you tell this woman that you do or don't want.
Nope.
It does not matter. If you care about a woman's heart at all, just don't. Do not like go into relationships or situationships until you are ready or at least open to pursuing a true connection with someone that could last. I mean, I get it. It's hard for men because they are physical creatures. And it's like if the opportunity presents itself, it's really hard to say no to that. I get it.
It comes down to integrity as well.
But exactly. But it also comes down to like I believe a true alpha man is a man that can control his physical urges for the sake of doing what is right by a woman.
Absolutely.
Whether that woman presents herself to him as like, well, yeah, I can do casual or not. Think about it. Like, be honest with yourself. Like, no matter what a man says to a woman is going to become attached. It's just the way it is.
That's also the mastery and control aspect of it.
Yes, exactly. Right? Like if you're going to call yourself an alpha, I want to see what your sex life looks like because an alpha male is going to control it.
Nope. When I date, I don't. If I actually have to like someone in order to be that like a physically vulnerable with them when it comes to sex.
Yeah.
Right. I don't kiss on the first or even the second date to the point where women have said like, hey, like you didn't.
Do you like me?
Kiss me.
Like,
but they're so used to men that are just jumping on whatever opportunity.
And it's so confusing for now, like within like our generation of dating now. It's like on one side, there are the women who want to be kissed.
Yes.
They want that man who's going to be able to quote unquote take them.
Yeah.
On the other side, no, we need consent.
Yeah.
Right. So it's very confusing when we're dating. It's like, hey, I walk her to her door, et cetera, et cetera. Like I'm old school that way.
Right.
Right. Like I am very respectful of boundaries, like to the point where depending on the situation, like I'm saying like, hey, like I really want to kiss you right now.
Yeah.
And if one woman perceives that as weak, like just fucking kiss me already.
Right.
One woman be like, oh, like, oh, thank you for doing that.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, et
and
cetera.
I've been on both ends where I've like been on a date where a guy just like went for it, and I was like, no, whoa, buddy, what?
Right.
But then there have been times where it was like, hello, I'm here. Are you gonna, so I do get it.
It depends on the situation.
But I think a woman gives cues.
It does.
Yes, but
like, pay
also
attention,
there are the cues there, but it's still also very confusing for us because then we're also getting the message that those cues, like, oh, don't just because she's into you that way.
Right.
It's very risky in today's day and age because of like the Me Too movement and all those other aspects that go along with it. To where like I'm comfortable in masculinity.
Yeah.
Right. I'm a firm believer that when men are strong and they're masculine, their female or the feminine side within the relationship doesn't have to be in their masculine. The feminine's going to feel safe.
Yeah.
And within the bedroom, like the strong feminine is going to want to be quote unquote taken. Now, I'm not talking about like some heavy BDSM type stuff that goes along with it too. Yeah. But like when a man is very strong in his masculine, that masculine energy is there. The woman can completely be vulnerable and give herself into that sexual moment on a deep and emotional and physical level. Right? When a man's not strong in his masculinity, the feminine has to step into her masculine.
Yes.
Right.
And then you will resent us for it.
Right.
Yes.
So it's very difficult to find that balance. But even me, like I feel like I'm pretty comfortable and strong in my masculinity. But at times I still don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a huge difference in kissing a woman on a first date and throwing yourself all over them, though.
Yes.
100%.
Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, there is 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't smother somebody.
Yeah,
No.
I mean, like a end of the date, like kiss on the cheek, maybe a small peck on the lips isn't going to offend most women.
Right.
If they're interested. But even if they're not interested, I don't think it's going to offend them.
You can also feel someone's intentions sometimes. I mean,
Of course.
you can. You can feel intentions behind something.
I mean, the way my personality is, like I'm saying, like, if we go out to dinner and stuff like that, like even before the first date, I was like, listen, I'm going to let you know, like, I'm not a piece of meat. Like I have feelings, I have emotions. So like, you're gonna have to work for this.
Right.
They're like, ha, 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 ha. I'm like, you might get a butterfly kiss.
Yeah.
Right. Or a hug, like a hand hug or something like that. But like, listen, like sister, you're gonna have to work for this.
Sadly, do you know like how many times I've told a man that and they still try it anyway?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, men
like,
have a hard time listening to that.
come on. Like,
Apparently.
They're like, I don't believe you. Okay, then why did I say it?
You'll see by the end of the night.
Like,
I was like, we can cuddle,
I'll
we can
change
watch
your mind.
something after like 2 or 3 dates and cuddle, maybe kiss a little bit like that. But when it comes to like, I know for myself, like given my history of being very out there in active addiction and just acting a fool, that I know that like I need a connection.
Yeah.
There's been times in the past where I've been being intimate with a woman and mid coitus, like literally be like, this is empty.
Right.
This is not for me. This is not checking the box that I need to have checked.
Jordan Peterson says that when men sleep around like that, they immediately actually resent the woman that was willing, let's say one night stand. He talks about how like after something like that, a man's like immediate response is to, okay, how quickly can I get out of here afterwards? Because there's like an underlying resentment towards a woman that would be willing to just sleep with them without them having to earn it.
Interesting.
So
I think it's really interesting
does he think
too.
that's a subconscious thing?
He does, but he says it's because of like an internal guilt that men have, even if they're not aware of it, for using someone without any connection, or you know what I mean?
Or it's the value that they may unconsciously place on the woman for like, oh, she just let me do X, Y, or Z without working.
And then they have to feel guilt for that.
Yes.
And I find it very interesting.
Yeah.
But it makes sense too.
Yeah.
It does make sense.
It does make sense. No,
like if you think about it, because men can be so like cold and cruel to women that they've just slept with but never like had any sort of connection with.
Right.
Especially like younger girls that are like willing to do those things, right?
Yeah.
So.
And it's also the pornography that we grew up with.
Yeah.
Right. Like with the, like, listen, man, I'm kink positive. I'm pro sex. If you're consenting adults, get weird, whatever butters your muffin. Right. But again, with pornography, it's where like the woman is like seen as an object for our pleasure to be there. It really gives us the sense of idea of like, oh, she's here to do X, Y, or Z. To where there's even done research shown that even, I think this research is like 10 years old or so, like even people who are 14, 15, 16, 17 becoming sexually active are engaging in the acts that they're seeing in pornography that are not quote unquote normal.
Right.
Now, of course, like, we get older, we know what we like, et cetera, but like there's girls who are engaging in specific sexual acts that they perceive as this is normal.
Or they perceive that this is what men want.
Yes.
And they don't have that value over their own, identity.
Right.
So it's like, I'm going to do this because I know that a lot of guys would want this, and this makes me more appealing.
And this can, exactly. And then this will,
But then actually it's like the reverse. It's actually the reverse, because then every single man looks at you as a piece of meat.
Well, it's the slut shaming.
Right, it is.
And then of course,
right.
yeah. Like I've known girls like that were doing things that were like, whoa, for their age. And every single guy had nothing but horrible things to say about them. But this poor girl thinks that she's doing it because that's what these guys want. It's making her, more, I don't even know, like more appealing, but it's actually the opposite of that.
It is the opposite.
And of course, the guys will still engage. They'll go and talk about her in a horrible, demeaning way.
Right.
And then still go engage with her.
Oh, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah, that's why it's crazy. I said it once before. It's like the hypocrisy in it all is outrageous.
It's brutal.
I mean, it's like I was saying, like these guys on some of these podcasts will bring like hordes of these girls on and just completely berate and demean them.
Oh yeah, I've seen some of those clips.
It's crazy, dude.
Because
they do OnlyFans, and that's listen. At the end of the day, you don't have to agree with what someone does, but you don't need to dehumanize them on a forum like that. No. And then on top of it all, there's OnlyFans only exists because
of men
watch it. So like you perpetuate this whole cycle, and then you want to bring these girls on and you want to just completely dehumanize them for it. Like, what are you nuts? Like the hypocrisy and the whole thing bothers me to my core.
Like since its inception, like what has it made? This like there's been $5.1 billion in transactions through OnlyFans.
It's wild. And you know what? I'll be honest. I don't even blame the girls who do it.
No,
they make so much money.
Women have been getting exploited forever.
They're like, if I'm going to get exploited anyway, I might as well make money doing it.
Yeah. If you found an opportunity to exploit a man, go for it. I don't give a shit.
I'd be lying if I hadn't thought of like Foot Finder or something.
Right? No, exactly. Me too.
It's
I had better feet. My God, I would get into that business.
Like, do you make
sitting on the couch like 10:30 on a Wednesday night, be like, maybe
right.
And then
let's see how it goes. But yeah, men like that bother me because at the end of the day, they're fucking horrible.
And it's hard
people,
because
it's insane to me, dude. I hate it.
These guys come in, like these young kids come into the therapeutic space, and I'm trying to like work with them about like their mentality and the struggles they're having with their friendships or relationships, and like to deprogram that.
Yeah.
Even as a licensed clinician, someone who's higher educated, someone who's experienced in this, like who has all this experience, it's brutal to even deprogram these young guys and even some of the older guys from this like systematic programming that they've had since the beginning of time.
Yeah. And then they see these idiots and they look up to them. They see the money, the car, the girls. They think like, oh, that's who I want to be. But meanwhile, most people can't stand to be around those guys.
Like, what does Andrew Tate talk about the rotisserie chicken mentality?
What?
He says the only thing that you should be doing is buying rotisserie chickens.
What does that mean?
They're like $6 or $7. It's a full meal because if you are using that time to cook, you could be using that time to hustle. So you are wasting your time and your value by spending the hour, half hour, 45 minutes cooking for yourself when you can do it cheaply by getting a rotisserie chicken so that you could hustle and build your brand or your business, et cetera, that goes along with it. Google it. Look it up. He talks about rotisserie chicken.
I just don't even get it. It's like, what?
The hustle culture is brutal.
It's brutal because it's like there's so much more to life. And how many times do millionaires or celebrities have to tell us that money and power does not create happiness?
It doesn't.
But when you have none, it's appealing beyond anything else.
It is. But
I've had guys who've come to see me who pull up in the Rolls. They have the $150,000 Rolex on their wrist. They have been CEOs and sold companies. And literally, like, one of my self-care activities for this guy, I was like, you work too much. Pick a Ferrari in your garage and drive it on the weekends, like as to like a way to decompress. These guys come in, they still have the same exact struggles in their relationships. They still have the same exact self-esteem issues, the anxiety, the substance abuse. It doesn't matter.
No, it's not the answer.
No.
Nope.
Because, connection is more valuable than money.
It is.
You know what I mean?
Money
and you
life.
can make enough to support yourself and still have a good life, but also put the focus on the relationships in your life. Like you can do both.
We need connection. Money makes life easier, simpler, I guess.
Yeah, in some ways.
It solves money problems.
It solves money problems, right? And it's nice to not have to worry about, the financial side of things because that could be a huge stress on people. But we need human connection. I mean, it can't all be about money and hustle all the time. I mean, it's so, like you said, it's hollow. There's nothing to it. How long can you sustain that before you're just like, I need more? Like now you have to share it with you have to share it with somebody.
Right, exactly.
Like I want nothing more to share my success with someone in my life.
Oh, I want a partner next to me with like raising a family who's going to be there to support and squat up and do this thing.
That's why I hate the narrative of people like Andrew Tate, because it's like, you know how much better it would be if you had someone building with you?
Yeah.
Like building an empire with you.
Absolutely.
That's the point.
Like by your side.
That's the point.
Like, and how much more fulfilling that would actually be. You know?
There is
100%.
nothing more that I want than that.
Yeah, me too.
I want my person. I want her there. I want her to challenge me, call me out on my shit, raise a couple little badass kids wearing Wu-Tang gear when they're like infants.
Wu-Tang.
No, my kids are going to be in Jordans. That's why I asked for it. Jordan 1s.
Yeah.
You guys say that. Trust me. You can have all these ideas, but your kids they won't wear any of it. They won't wear any of it. I don't want to wear that. There's lots of tears.
The shoes onto their feet.
Yeah. But I want all those things. Like I want to have a deep, intimate, like I want to go through the struggles. I want those aspects of it. I want all of that.
Yeah.
Right. There's been times where like even when I've dated women in the past and we've gotten into like a disagreement or an argument, I've warned them. I was like, listen, if I start smiling, if we're like arguing about something, it's not because I'm disrespecting you or anything else like that. It's just that I'm so grateful in that moment to have the connection with someone that I can be in an argument with, but still hold love in my heart for. That's everything that I've ever wanted.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm grateful for the aspect of we can be connected, still feel love for each other, and have that deep emotional bond. You can be standing in front of me telling me that I'm being an asshole, and I can smile because I still want to be with you.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful to have those real experiences as a human and as a man to be there, to be able to show up.
I feel like if I start smiling during an argument, that's your cue to leave the room.
Right.
That means, okay, you've crossed a line and there's no going back from here. So you might want to leave.
If I'm smiling, it's usually followed up with like, no, I'm smiling because I'm recognizing that you're right and I'm sorry.
Right. Yeah. It's not a bad thing to admit when you're wrong. I mean,
no,
I'm all for it.
That's part of the companionship, right? Like that's why I want it so bad. Like, who else is going to call you on your shit?
Set boundaries with me, please.
Yeah, like they're going to make you better. Like anyone that completes you in that way is going to make you better. There's no way they can't.
And I find it really unattractive when a man can't engage in like a disagreement. Like they just completely shut you down altogether because they can't handle your emotion. And two, they just don't have time for it. You're just too much. It's like, excuse me, but like be a human for a second.
Right.
Actually have this conversation with me. I'm not going to raise my voice. I'm not going to disrespect you. I'm not going to cuss at you or call you names. I just want to know how we're going to compromise in this situation. But a man who is just like refuses to even allow that to turn into a conversation, like that's so unattractive and so dismissive. And I can't stand it.
Are you guys familiar with John Gottman?
Yes.
Gottman. So the Gottman work, right? He built his entire, like Victoria, who works for me, she's Gottman level 1 and Gottman level 2 certified, right? I'm going to be doing the Gottman level 1, but I'm not going to market it because I'm not doing couples. I'm not getting stabbed in the parking lot in the middle of a triangle. His entire background, him and his partners, was that how you handle conflict in a relationship is going to be the determinant of how you stay together.
Wow.
To where even within his research, in his lab, he would take couples, put them in a room for 10, 15 minutes, watch them interact with each other, and with like a 90% accuracy level, be able to determine whether they were going to be together 5 years or not.
Yeah.
Newly married couples.
That's wild.
Because the way that we handle conflict is vitally important.
It is.
To where I'll even talk to my guys that I see individually. I was like, listen, like you can go see Victoria, not because your relationship is on the rocks, but just going to go to good to better.
Yeah.
You guys need to learn how to argue better.
Yeah.
Not to stop arguing.
Yeah.
You need to learn to argue more effectively better.
Argue for the relationship.
Yes.
Not against each other.
Because there's you, there's her, and then there's the relationship in the middle.
Yeah.
Who's working on the relationship?
Yeah.
And that's what we do in couples work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing.
No, I agree.
Yeah.
It has to be that way. I mean, listen, if you're not, you can't just, no one doesn't argue. Let's be clear about that. You argue because you care.
Yeah, if you're in a relationship and you guys don't have disagreements or arguments, that's a major problem.
It's a huge red flag.
Huge.
I mean,
well, somebody just doesn't give a shit.
Right.
Is what it is.
Someone doesn't care. So, and there's there's nothing healthy about that. So everyone's like, oh, well, you guys argue all the time. It's like, no, we don't argue all the time. But it's healthy arguing. It's arguing because we care about each other.
Right.
So you can't have a relationship without that. I mean, if you guys are never having an argument over anything, I mean, no one's that perfect.
Right.
Your relationship's not a quality relationship just because you don't argue. It's quality when you figure out how to compromise with each other, and come to common ground on things that you disagree. Like you work to improve the relationship always.
Right.
I mean, you always, it's a constant job. I mean, I look at my parents, I've been married for 40 years. They still work on it to this day.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's what it's all about. It's always going to be, you're always going to be growing together forever because you're going to change so many times throughout the course of your life. In your 30s, in your 40s, in your 50s, you're always becoming someone different, right? You're always evolving. So you guys have to grow together. And that's going to cause conflict at times. And you need to be able to overcome it and keep moving forward with each other. Otherwise, look, so many people give up today. As soon as things become too difficult for them, they tap out.
Yep.
That's why the divorce rate is what it is. I mean, it's insane. The values that our parents and our grandparents used to have don't exist today.
Yeah.
Right.
Not even close. And it's out. It's sad. It really is.
It is. I've heard like
It really is.
comparison of like a relationship with a smooth stream rock. I know the sound. Maybe you've heard it before.
I feel like I have heard this before.
I feel like
actually. Yeah.
So they talk about how the only way that a rock can get smooth on all edges is from the resistance of the current over time.
It's erosion.
And how like in relationships you start off as two jagged rocks, and the only way to get to that smooth state is by like, resisting one another and like coming up against one another until those edges are smooth.
Yeah. That's pretty cool.
And I love
That's a good
that.
analogy.
I have a
love
feeling
that.
my couples counselor Victoria is going to be making a reel with that same exact story at some point next week.
But it's just a beautiful like idea of like the only way to get into a beautiful state is to continue to push one another and help each other through those jagged edges, like it doesn't matter, where you are in your life. It doesn't matter addiction or otherwise, male or female, there is hope. There are people that are here to support you and help you. Don't ever just give up. Don't ever just end things because you don't think there's any hope for you. Like just keep moving forward. One step is better than no step at all. Like reaching out to one friend is better than keeping it to yourself and isolating. Like I think so many people, they struggle with drugs and alcohol because they don't feel like they have anything else to help them. But there are so many resources. There are so many things. And you look beyond yourself. Like get outside of your world and see what there is out there for you. Get out of your bed, walk in nature. If that's the only place you have to start, just start there. What would you say? There's
nothing that anyone out there is going through that someone else hasn't been through already.
Yes.
Absolutely.
A lot of times we struggle with mental health or addiction thinking that our situations are unique, and they're not.
Yeah.
Right. That's one of the things that I tell guys is that they even, there are millions upon millions of other men who are struggling with the exact same thing that you are, and it's okay. Right. There is a solution. There is a way out of these things, regardless of whatever it is that they're working on. Yeah. But the thing is that when we talk about the masculinity aspect of it is to really pull on that courage and that strength that is inherent in every single person on this planet to have the courage and strength to walk towards the problem and not away from it.
Yeah.
And it's possible.
It is.
It would not be, I tell guys this, I'm like, I would not have a fucking job.
Yeah.
I would not have a job if it was not possible for us to work on these things and for you to get better.
Yeah.
Right? People would not keep coming back. People would not refer their friends and family.
Yeah.
Right? Other professionals in my field would not refer their husbands and sons to me because they trust me that much and see the work that we're doing if it did not work.
Yeah. You can always change your story.
You're like, I had a sponsor used to tell me, he's like, you're not a tree. Get up and move.
Yeah.
There are always options. There are always ways out of these things. It may not be the thing that you want.
Yes.
But it might be the exact same thing that you need.
Yeah. You have the pen. You're the one holding the pen. You get to decide what it looks like. And it doesn't mean it'll be easy. It'll be hard.
Right. And one of the things that I always say is that if there's anybody out there who's listening, anybody who contacts me, right, you're going to get me.
Yeah.
Right. There's no admin assistant. There's nobody else like that to where if you message me and say, hey, man, I'm struggling, that doesn't mean I'm going to be able to provide therapy to you across state lines or anything else like that, but I will help you find resources in your area or within other people that I know.
Yeah.
Right. I'm part of a lot of Facebook groups of thousands and hundreds of thousands of clinicians across this nation, as well as people that I know.
Yeah.
If you contact me, you will get a referral.
Yeah.
I will put you in contact with somebody who can help you get the help that you need. Insurance, whatever it might be. So please don't hesitate to reach out.
Yeah.
Message me on Instagram, right? Text me. The number of my, the phone number on my website's my cell.
Okay.
My work cell, not my personal cell. But like I will
good.
respond to you.
Yeah.
Right? Don't be afraid to reach out, right? The same way that I'm showing up here with you guys on this pod, et cetera, is the same guy that you will get when you reach out to me for help.
Yeah.
Or if we work together, and that's going to be it.
Appreciate that.
Yeah. Thank you for coming out here and doing this and speaking about these important issues.
It was my pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity to get more of this stuff out there.
It was a pleasure to have you, man.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Absolutely.
So yeah, but just remember, you're not alone. Everybody goes through their struggles, and don't be afraid to open up and talk to somebody. Be sure to check this guy out, Phil Treiber. You can check him out on IG at Dude Breathe Counseling. He's very, very good at what he does. So make sure you check out his page. Reach out to him. He's got his cell phone number on there, not his personal cell phone, his work cell phone. So be sure to hit him up. As usual, thanks everybody for joining us. We appreciate you. Definitely give us your feedback. Let us know what you thought. Be sure to follow us on IG at notfornothing.podcast. Follow us on TikTok and YouTube at notfornothingpodcast. You can catch every episode every Tuesday at 5 a.m. on Spotify, Amazon, and Apple Podcasts at 5 p.m. on YouTube. But thank you guys. Have a good rest of the day. Enjoy your weekend. And we're out.